Thank you, Dr. Stein. We're going to get you a chair right now. Oh, okay. And our second panelist is Sarah Schwartz-Koskutis with a BS degree in Mass Communications from Boston University and a Master of Education degree from Harvard University. Sarah has been in the education and media fields for almost 20 years and worked with Langdon Children's Museum for 6 years. Sarah founded a digital art program for inner city students, managed the Langdon Children's Film Festival, and founded and co-taught a series of film classes for elementary school students. So welcome, Sarah. So we'll give the panelists a few minutes to give you their raw first impressions of the film, and then we'll invite Paula, who will try to engage you guys into some discussion. And then Paula will be selling DVDs outside as well, which I'm definitely going to buy one. The soundtrack to the film, because I think it's incredible, as well as a few other things, and so you can get more information out there. So, which one of you would like to go first?
We may switch off here, I don't know, but I thought it was a very interesting film and a very moving film. I think it was particularly moving. Why was it moving? Why was it interesting? And I think it was really the children. I mean, you notice there was a lot of close-ups on them and a lot of, sort of testimony, or what you want to call it, or speaking from them. And it wasn't always smiles. I think, in fact, one of the most amazing scenes and the most amazing face was Aimee, I believe her name was, where she's with her mother and they're talking about their lives, and when she starts sort of tearing up, etc. And I thought that was very powerful, and there were a number of powerful scenes in the film. I think that the major sort of theme that I got out of the film was that music created in these kids and in their parents a sense of community. And I think that was obviously a theme. But I have a critique of the film in that sense as well. And that is that I don't think we see enough of the real threats to this community. They're mentioned, we see the armed guards, we see there's a bomb that goes off. We see the poverty somewhat, but I mean, even the houses where one of the kids takes us through the house, it's poor, but it looks really nice. I mean, it's almost too nice. It's almost too colorful. And so I guess my major critique of the film would be that there wasn't enough tension in it. Tension between the problems these kids and their parents, serious problems of poverty, violence, which are mentioned, have to go through on a daily basis. And yet the music is what brings them out of it. And as I say, not only kids, but their parents as well. And I guess I would have preferred a little more on the poverty, a little more on the violence, a little more context to really understand how great this achievement was. So, just first time.
Oh, I hate microphones. I didn't take a lot of notes because I spent a lot of time crying watching this movie. Here's what I was struck by is, I worked with kids, inner city youth, some of the poorest kids in Miami, and I think a lot of portrayals of kids in poverty is very one-sided, very victims. These kids are victims, they're victims, they're victims. And from the opening shot, I think it was Aimee who was singing in the opening shot, or Wenji. And it was such a stark contrast, like this, we in America right now have this diva culture, I call it, where everybody who can sing happy birthday thinks they're entitled to 85,000 things because I'm the most talented person on the planet. And I was worried, that might be where it was going to go, and I was so pleased over the course of the film because, these kids and their families were so strong, and you saw their drive was so strong, and the parents' dreams and said was so strong for these kids, and the only thing that said they don't have access to is education. And I found myself, I don't have a lot of notes, but I copied down the name of the charity because you really saw, just giving these kids education will help rise them up. I also love that the project was them doing native music from their own culture, because I think it would have been so easy to just have them be a chorus of kids who, get up and do Hollywoody stuff, and just because I think that empowered them, And even they said, I used to hear these instruments, and I was so bored when I heard it. But really getting a love for their own culture, and then several of the kids were saying, I want to get an education, I want to get a career because I want to give back to my community. I want to get an education, I want to get a career because I want to give back to my family. I thought it was just so powerful. So it was wonderful.
So Paul, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the project, how you guys decided that you wanted to make a movie out of it, and just kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here, taking a part of your Sunday to be here. It means a lot to all of us that were involved in the film. I had been traveling to the Philippines since the late 1990s. In 1998, I started traveling, and I was moved, frankly, every time I went, every neighborhood I went to, and every home I visited. These kinds of discussions were happening with no camera rolling. It was just the social worker or myself visiting the students in the program. And so the seedling of the movie started really way back then. I felt, when I would come home, I would see, for example, TV commercials from large charities trying to raise money in these neighborhoods that I was just in, and I felt that they were not doing justice to the people whatsoever. So actually the guy who filmed most of this footage, about 90% of it was shot with one camera. One young man who was a filmmaker, who was a volunteer for CFCA in the Philippines, and at the end of his volunteer service, he wrote me an email. He says, I own the camera that, the same camera that Born into Brothels was just shot with, that just won the Academy Award. And he basically said, you can make a film, a quality film, on a reasonable budget. And he simply planted that idea in our head that, hey, we could make a film if we chose to. And so we simply chose the Philippines for a couple reasons. One, their use of English. We felt that the crowd could connect with them, hearing their own words. We also wanted to pay tribute to this particular place, Zamboanga, because in the early days of CFCA, they sponsored children in a school. And when those kids left that school, they would leave the program. Mari Balmandi, who you saw in the film, was the coordinator of the project there. She approached us many years ago one time and said, some of our kids are leaving the school. She was a social worker in the school. She said, and they drop out of the CFCA program, but they live in my neighborhood and they need the program more than ever. Could I start a community-based program? And we said, take us to your neighborhood. We want to meet these families who used to be in the program that were no longer. And of course, what was happening is something like a health condition of the mom or the dad would knock this family down a level in their economic status. They couldn't afford the counterpart to go to that private school anymore. So of course, we told her, yes, please, let's start a community program. So that was in about the year 2000. That, frankly, has changed the CFCA program worldwide. Now, all of the programs are based in the community. They're made up of all faith traditions, wherever we're working, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, indigenous communities are all in the program together, and there's no religious agenda to the program whatsoever. As surprising as it is sometimes with a name like Christian Foundation, but it's, anyway, so we chose the Philippines for those reasons, and their love of music as well. We thought that was important.
Does anybody have any questions? Any comments on the film as well?
One other comment. I thought another strength of the film was the editing, and particularly there was one scene that I absolutely loved, which was the construction of the theater. Now that was also the one where you used perhaps a little fast action and chopping it up. It was very well done. But the music in the background, this flipping back from the sort of panorama, then to the hands of the people, then to the faces, I thought that was very powerful. And also the concert scene, particularly when the kids are doing voiceovers while the concert is going on, about the meaning of it for them. That was also very powerful. So
thank you. Yes, sir.
When you say the comment at the end, the kids, most of them finish college degree, but only 2 of them you claim to have gotten a job. So is that common? The kids actually do have a way of getting to college, but they get out and they're actually back into the same neighborhood with a college degree and no work?
In the Philippines, did everybody hear the question? So the idea of, are there jobs available for these kids once they graduate? If you can graduate from college in the Philippines, usually you can get a job. Sometimes you have to struggle to find that job. For example, Lori Ann, she moved up to Manila. Her degree is in secondary education. She has not been able to go to work as a teacher yet, but she's working at a department store, helping to send money to her family back down in Zamboanga. But she keeps trying, she keeps applying. So it was 2 years ago, the Philippines actually just passed Mexico in the number of people that have to leave the country to find work. And this is young people and their parents. Oftentimes, one of the spouses will go to Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, they'll work on a cruise ship, a cargo ship, and they're sending remittances back home to send the rest of the kids through school. But no, actually several of them are working now. The film, we finished cutting it it would have been last June. Since then, Christian, who studied accounting, actually has gotten a CPA. And he's working for an accounting company. Harold, he toured in a professional Kulintang group. He came back and now he's working at it's kind of a wholesale supplier company. He majored in economics. So it's, the jobs are there, they're not automatic, it's a struggle. I think that's one of the next areas of CFCA's thinking is what can we do about job creation for the young people?
One last question, anybody? I have a final question. You mentioned you had over 200 hours of footage. How did you decide what was going to be in the film? And were you part of that decision in that process?
Right. It was painful. It was really painful. The first, we called it an assembly. It was almost not a rough cut, but the first assembly of the movie was 4.5 hours long. And we loved every minute of it, right? And so a tough decision, and yes, there was a team of us, Barkley and I, that were in the Philippines for basically 5 months of filming. We were in the room along with the editor, who was interestingly based in New York. So we did all of this via phone calls and on our Macs, I forget what it's called, but anyway, we were able to, she would show us cuts and we would comment on them. But we had to make the decision. You saw the trip we made to that indigenous community where we were learning to play the bamboo sticks and these little guitars. That used to be 45 minutes long. There was a 45-minute journey around the Philippines talking to these Filipino artists. Joey Ayala granted us an interview. And that was a part of the original story, was our search on what should this musical project be. So really, these guys, Joey, Popong Landero, I consider them the intellectual authors of the traditional music. They said, ask the kids to set down their Western instruments, just for a moment, and to dig below this veneer that they wear of Western pop culture. That is, he described it as a veneer. And so really, Joey and Popong, I consider them the real genius behind the concept. We just, there's that saying in the gospel, knock and ye shall receive. I believe the person on the other side of the door can tell if your knock is sincere or not. And these Filipino philosophers and poets, they opened up their minds to us. And they basically said, if you're here to really show not their poverty, but their attitude towards their poverty, then you should be here and we'll be behind the project. And so I think this level of society, this $2 and $3 a day, working poor society, I don't think has adequately been covered. Because in reality, some of their homes are very clean. They might be a dirt floor, but the little they have, they keep organized. And I think it's something that I think CFCA would hope that the film does is encourage a new conversation about people living at this level. They're not in refugee camps. They don't need food dropped from airplanes. But just one hiccup and they're knocked out of school. And so I believe there's a large group in the world at this level that deserve our best efforts to try and fund their passions, and they will do great things. So that's the spirit of the CFCA program. And if anybody wants to visit afterwards, we'll be happy to talk more out in the side. And we do have DVDs and music CDs. If you'd like to show, you're welcome to show this movie to your schools, your friends, anything like that. We're really looking for screening opportunities and partnerships in whatever imagination you might have to share the message in the film.
Awesome. So thank you, Paul. Thank you for Steve and Sarah for our panel. So guys.